Hello everyone, I'm Judge Jared, and you're watching the 8th episode of Rules Roundup. This is a series where I go over various questions that have been asked in the community from community members about rules and card interactions, and they run the gamut everywhere from kind of beginner questions from players that aren't as experienced to more advanced and kind of more complex questions that come up from people who've been playing a little bit longer. So it kind of runs the gamut here. And I go over what the answers are to those questions, as well as what the rules are behind that, kind of the reasoning behind it. So we don't just memorize the answer, but we also get like how we got to that conclusion. And this is to serve the purpose of a couple different things. One is that if you didn't know the answers to these questions, then it's to help educate you and make you a better player by understanding the rules better. And if you did know the answer, then it's a way of testing yourself, not just on what the answer is, but to get you to think about how you would explain it to other people if you were either doing judging or if you were just at locals and trying to explain it to a friend or your opponent or something like that. And just kind of getting into the reasoning again behind it and not just what the answer is. So with all that all out of the way, let's go to the first question for this time. We've got a question about Curilla here. It says, for Curilla's effect, can you play 2 Job Knight of cost 4 or less, or do I have to play 2 that equal 4 cost? So we're talking about her auto ability, right? Her auto ability, which begins on the 3rd line of her text, says, when Curilla enters the field, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck. Play up to 2 Job Knight with a total cost of 4 or less among them onto the field, and return the other cards to the bottom of your deck in any order. So the question here that they're asking is, when you're picking those up to 2 Job Knights, is this restriction of 4 or less cumulative between both the cards you might choose, or is it 4 or less individually amongst them? So if we look closely at her text here, right, this is starting now on the 4th line. It says play up to 2 Job Knight. So that's our first restriction on this, is that it's up to 2, right? So your choices are you can play 0, you can play 1, you can play 2 Job Knight. 3 is right out. And then it says with a total cost of 4 or less among them. That's key, all those words there. Total cost of 4 or less among them. So we're not talking about there being a cost for each one individually. We're talking about when you take the cost of each of the cards, if you chose more than one, and you add them together, what is their total cost? Is it 4 or less? Then you're golden. So yeah, you don't get to play one 4 CP and another 4 CP and get both of them out there. This card is good enough without getting to go that big with it. And then also as a quick reminder, when we're talking about cost here in effects, anytime an effect refers to a card's cost, we're talking about the printed cost on the card. This isn't really relevant at this point in time for knights. I don't think there's any knights that have cost reduction. Actually, nope. As soon as I said that, I just realized the old school 6 CP Lightning Ramza that costs 6 has that ability that reduces his costs by 1 for each forward you control, I think. Not that anybody has seen that in a long time. But my point here being that when there's an effect that talks about a card's cost, we're talking about the printed cost. If they have reductions like that, those reductions are going to come into play when you're casting the card and affecting the cast, the cost when you're casting it. But it's not going to have an effect on anything that refers to that card's cost. It is that is fixed when we're talking about the cost of a card via other effects talking about it. So here we're talking about cost 4 or less printed. If we had that ROMs I just talked about, it was 6 costs. You would not be able to play that off of this Curilla, even if you had enough forwards out that it could have reduced the cost, because we don't care about reducing the cost right now. We're just talking about the printed cost on the card itself. So just a little reminder there about that as well. All right, next question here is, so I have soldiers on my field. My opponent is playing this summon. How would this work? Will all my active forwards take the 8,000 or just Matt? I see Matt says they can't be chosen by opponent's abilities. Matt's one of these new soldiers that we got in Opus 25. We got a whole bunch of them from, I think it's the first soldier. Ever Crisis. Got a bunch of soldiers of new names spread across different elements, and this is one of them. And he's got this field ability that says, the job soldier other than Matt you control gain. This character cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities. Right, so he's on the field. All the other soldiers that you have, they all gain that ability. They all now have the ability, this character cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities. Then we have Fat Chocobo as the summon in question. It has a cost reduction effect to it, but other than that, its effect just says deal 8,000 damage to all the forwards opponent controls. So the short answer to this question is, opponent casts Fat Chocobo, what happens to my forwards, my soldiers, when I have men on the field? The short answer is they get 0 protection. And the reason they get 0 protection is because Fat Chocobo is not an ability, it's a summon. Right? So that's a little bit of the womp womp about this, is that it's a summon, and so it makes Matt's effect completely irrelevant in this scenario given by the question specifically. But for the sake of learning here, we're going to talk about what if it was an ability. What if we had something like Fat Chocobo that was an ability, and how would that interact with Matt? So if we replace Fat Chocobo with, say, the Earth Genova Synthesis, that when it enters the field, it deals damage to all the forwards opponent controls as well, right? So what would happen in that scenario where we are talking about an ability? In this case, unfortunately for the Matt player, again, it doesn't actually help. And the reason why is because Matt's ability that he's giving to everybody else says this character cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities. Now, effects like Fat Chocobo or like Genova Synthesis, they just say deal whatever amount of damage to all the forwards opponent controls. Specifically, the effect does not use the word choose. And this is something to keep in mind with any effect that you're looking at. If it doesn't use the word choose, it is not choosing. And I know that maybe seems obvious, but it's just a quick little thing to remember anytime you're trying to figure out like how something interacts with characters or effects that say they cannot be chosen by things. Is if the effect we're talking about doesn't use the word choose, it's not choosing. And so the protection from being chosen doesn't apply. And that's what happens here with Matt. So if we had Genova Synthesis, it was dealing all that damage. Unfortunately, Matt's protection wouldn't do anything because Genova Synthesis, just like Fat Chocobo, doesn't choose anything. So, sorry to the person who asked this question. There's kind of 2 reasons why it doesn't work, but now we know kind of what the restrictions are with Matt and kind of what he protects and doesn't protect from. All right, next question here. Question on the wording of Jack Garland's ability that makes opponents' forwards attack once per turn if possible. Is this at least once, or does it stop cards like Gilgamesh from swinging multiple times? Jack Garland has this fun field ability. It says the forwards opponent controls must attack once per turn if possible. Now then on the other side of this, we have Gilgamesh, who has his own field ability that if you have enough different elements in your break zone, it makes it so now he can attack up to 3 times per turn if possible. So the question being asked here is because if we're assuming Gilgamesh has enough cards there that he has the ability to attack 3 times, and Jack Garland says forwards opponent controls must attack once per turn if possible. It's like, the question is, wait a second, must attack once per turn if possible. Does that mean must attack only once per turn? Like now is it a restriction? Is it saying they must attack, but also they must attack once and not twice or thrice or 4 times if you're Ravana? And the answer here is no, Jack Garland is not restricting the amount of times that you can attack in a turn. They chose for balancing, I'm assuming, on this effect to make it so that once a forward attacks once per turn, it's met that requirement. It's not forced to attack more than once. So if you have any cards like Gilgamesh that can attack more than once, but you didn't want to for some reason, once you've attacked that first time, you've satisfied the kind of requirement of Jack's ability, and you are not required to attack more than once. But it is not restricting you by saying, oh, you can now only attack once. It's not going to undo the fact that Gilgamesh has the capability of attacking more than once. So, it's kind of we get into the wording of things because of how the rules are and the effects in the text and everything. It can get very kind of legalese in terms of like having to parse exactly what words are used and not used. And that's where these questions come from a lot of the time. In this case, it's not suddenly making it so Gilgamesh can only attack once. He can still attack 3 times if he wants to, which if you've got 7 in the break zone, you probably want to because at that point Gilgamesh is popping off. So, all right, next up here. Can you use any type of CP to summon Rulgia for 1 cost? This is one of these words of the crystal we got a couple sets ago at this point. That they all have, well, not all of them, most of them have this alternate cost that you can do where you're paying a crystal and then some amount of CP to cast it instead of whatever the normal CP cost is of the card. And these Word of the Crystal cards are all structured the same way, where it's it's got that just the number, so it's 1 or 2 or what have you, and then the crystal to cast whatever the card is. So they're asking here, can I use any type of CP to summon Rulgia? As a quick little side note, I'm just going to give a friendly reminder that when we cast characters, we're not summoning them. I'm sure this is somebody that probably comes from Magic the Gathering and they're used to just everything being you're summoning creatures and all that. But just feel the need to bring it up because in this game, summons are an actual card type and we have to separate between characters and summons. So we'll be casting Rulgia, not summoning him. But back to the question here. Can you pay with any CP? Yes, you can pay with any CP because that symbol right there, that one that's in just the kind of white circle like that, that's a, I forget if it's officially called generic CP, but basically it's not specific to any particular element there. So unlike the other symbols we will see for like fire and wind and so forth, where it's the circles with the element kind of logo there. If it's this one that's just the white one, kind of generic white one, then yeah, you can pay with any CP for that. If you have dark or a light backup and you want to pay with dark or light CP, help yourself. Next question is, if Cloud chooses to deal damage to a forward and something else against an opponent with a Siren in play, does Cloud's entire effect get cancelled or just the damage part? My assumption is yes, as they are all part of one effect and not two separate triggers. This Cloud, if you didn't play during the kind of Avalanche meta, you probably haven't seen him before. And if you did play during the Avalanche meta, it's been a hot minute since you've seen him. Although I guess with the new Barret, maybe he's starting to see play again. But anyway, reminder here, or educating on what he does. He's got one massive auto ability. All 6 lines there, that is one auto ability. And when he enters the field, as long as you have another Job Avalanche forward in play, then he gets to choose up to 2 of the 3 actions that are listed there. And the first one of them is to choose a forward and deal it 10,000 damage. The second one is to play a Job Avalanche of cost 4 or less from your break zone onto the field. And the third one is to give all the forwards you control haste until the end of the turn. So we're assuming that you've met the requirement here of having the Avalanche forward, obviously. So played the Cloud, and then they're saying they chose the, deal 10,000 damage to a forward and then something else. Let's say the haste for the simplicity here. And then you have Siren, who has this auto ability. It says that when one or more forwards you control are chosen by your opponent's summon or ability, you may put the top card of your deck into the break zone. And if the card that's put in the break zone is not a forward, cancel its effects. So again, for this purpose of this question, we're assuming that Siren was successful. So we're canceling Cloud's effects, right? And so the question here is, because Cloud does multiple things, he's choosing a forward and dealing 10,000 damage, and he's also giving haste to all of the forwards. Are we just canceling the part that was choosing, or are we canceling the whole thing? I did answer a question about a different Cloud, the Opus 25 Cloud, who also similarly has a multi-action auto ability. A couple of episodes ago, I want to say it was. Maybe it was 3 or 4 at this point. And how that works out. And it's the same concept here. So the thing you want to always remember is that if you have an effect and it chooses at least one or more targets, then when that effect goes to resolve, if all the targets are invalid, then you cancel the whole thing. Right. Now, I guess that being the case, it's not really relevant here because we're not actually talking about making something invalid. We're talking about Siren canceling the effects. So, but I guess the reason I bring that up is because it's the similar concept, which is that these things are bound together, right? The effect is bound together. So you have multiple actions to it, but it's still one thing on the stack. It's still one effect. And they kind of all go together for better or worse. And it's the reason why this question comes up a lot with these effects is when it's the select, X number out of Y number effects. It seems like, oh, well, this is doing multiple things, so they're separate, right? But it's treated the same as when we have other effects that don't select for multiple, but they do multiple things. The example that comes to mind for me is Shiva 16. She has the auto ability. It says at the end of the turn, if your opponent had 2 or more forwards go into the break zone this turn, then you discard a card. Actually, I guess it only does one thing. What's the one I'm thinking of? I guess if you go way back to the old school days, Al Cid, right? Opus 2 Al Cid entered the field, chose a forward, active forward, dealt a 6k, and then played another character, a lightning forward of cost 3 or less onto the field, right? So it seems like they're unrelated, right? It seems like, okay, well, I dealt damage and I'm playing something on the field, but it's all one effect, right? So it's the same concept as that. So I know we kind of took quite a road to get to this answer there, but that's how it all works in terms of that. It's all one effect. Even if the effect does multiple things, it's all wrapped together. So if Siren cancels the effect, then it's canceling all of it. It's canceling the 10k, and it's canceling whatever the other action was that was chosen. Now, I hope you're ready for double Siren, because our next question is also Siren related. And hopefully I'll be able to keep it together a little bit more with this one. This question is, if Faris enters the field with 2 other Warriors of Light and gets 3 pings, my opponent has Realm and Siren on the field, and I target Siren with the first ping, Realm with the second, and then Realm with the third, how do the Siren triggers get added to the stack? Does the controller of Siren get to pick the order, or do the triggers get added in the order they were triggered? Now, you might have a hard time parsing exactly what all is going on here. I know this is one of those scenarios where it would be helpful if I had like a kind of top-down view of a field to kind of show exactly what's happening, which I don't have available right now, but I'm going to go ahead and try to give you, to illustrate what's going on here a little slower than I read that. So, Faris, of course, has this auto ability when she enters, that when she enters, she deals 1,000 damage to all forwards. Opponent's forwards, your forwards, everybody. She doesn't discriminate. She just starts blasting. Then she has a second auto ability that says, when Faris or a job Warrior of Light that you control is dealt damage, choose up to 1 forward opponent controls, deal it 3,000 damage. Siren, we just went over how Siren works, right? The trigger there is when 1 or more forwards you control are chosen by your opponent's summoner ability. And then you do the flip, cancel, depending on what happens. So what's happening here is Faris enters the field, does the 1,000 damage. The person who played Faris has 2 other Warriors of Light, right? So the damage gets dealt, and because Faris and the other 2 Warriors of Light all take damage, we now have 3 instances of Faris's auto ability triggering. There's 3 trigger events that happen here. Bam, 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 on the 3 Warriors of Light. And then what's going to happen is that obviously each of these triggers is they're choosing one of the forwards the opponent controls. The part of this question about choosing Realm and Siren is kind of irrelevant because it doesn't really matter whether you're choosing different targets or not. So I'm just going to kind of skip that. But you have 3 instances of Faris's auto ability. Each one of them is targeting a forward with the person who controls Siren. And every single time that you choose something with of the opponents while they have Siren, that is triggering Siren's auto ability. So the question is, how does this all work out in terms of the stack, right? And it's a very valid question because things like this can get difficult to kind of visualize, especially when it comes to the stack. People sometimes have a hard time really visualizing where everything is stacking and what the order of events is here. So the important thing to remember here is that auto abilities, when they trigger, they don't go on the stack until a player is about to gain priority. What happens is right before the player is about to gain priority, any auto abilities that have triggered get placed on the stack. And if there are multiple that it needs to be placed on the stack, what happens is that the turn player puts all of their auto abilities that have triggered onto the stack in whatever order they want, followed by the non-turn player putting all of their auto abilities that have triggered onto the stack in whatever order they want. So in this scenario, Faris comes in, does that first bit of 1,000 damage to everybody, triggers the 3 autos, and then right when the Faris player, I'm assuming that this is happening on the Faris player's turn. It's probably more likely that way. When that player is about to gain priority, you have these 3 auto abilities, and the Faris player gets to put them on the stack in whatever order they want. Kind of doesn't matter here because the 3 are the same, but they'll put the first one on and then choose one of the forwards that the Siren player controls. That will trigger Siren's auto ability when that first one gets put on the stack and chooses its target. However, we can't interrupt the fact that the Faris player still needs to finish putting their auto abilities on the stack, right? So the Siren player, they do have that auto trigger, but it's got to chill. It's just floating out there until the Siren player gets their turn to put their autos on the stack. So then the second auto The Faris player puts their second auto on the stack, chooses a target for it, and then bing, because this is a different auto ability, this is a different instance here, that triggers Siren again. And it's triggering for, whichever forward was chosen by this second one. And then third one gets put on the stack, choose a target for it. Bing, we just triggered Siren again, right? Now that the Faris player is done putting all of their 3 triggers on the stack, now we move over to the Siren player. And now there's nothing to add onto the stack except for the 3 Siren auto abilities. But just like I said before, if a player has multiple auto abilities that are waiting to be put on the stack, they can put them on the stack in whatever order they want. So it doesn't necessarily have to go on the stack in the order of what they were chosen by the Faris choices, right? So you can put them in whatever order you want on there. Just put one and then the next and the next. So I guess if we go back to the example here where it said, okay, it was first one was Siren, second one was Realm, third one was Realm. If you want to stack it as we're going to put Realm on first and then Siren and then Realm, just kind of make a sandwich out of it, you could do that. If you want to go Realm, Siren, so that the Siren one resolves first, that's fine. If you want to go Siren on the bottom and then Realm, you could do that, right? But yeah, because of the timing of this and when these are being put on the stack, in both scenarios, the players get to just kind of put them on the stack in whatever order they want. And in the case of the Siren player, yeah, they can choose whatever order they wish there. So hopefully you stuck with me through all of that and were able to kind of follow it. If not, you can always just rewind and watch it again. Maybe slower, faster. I don't know, whatever works for your brain. But that's it for that question here. I promise the next one has nothing to do with Siren. Okay, next question is, I'm wondering when making a deck list for a tournament, if I'm using Legacy Collection cards, if I need to include the full RE serial number / regular serial number card number, or if I just use the normal serial number, is that okay? Since some decks will have a mix of Legacy and promo cards, I figured I should ask. Thank you. So this is fun because I think up till now, I haven't actually answered any questions about tournament stuff specifically. It's all been about cards, card interactions and rules and all that stuff. So if you're somebody who has not gone to an official tournament before, then you probably are not that familiar with deck list stuff. And even if you have, you're probably thinking the same thing. If you're a little bit less experienced, same thing as this person who asked the question about how we write in the serial numbers. But if you're unfamiliar, I included a picture here of a deck list from our lovely Materia Hunter website, which I highly recommend for kind of all your FFTCG needs for tracking your collection, deck building, links to buy cards. Materia Hunter, wasn't planning on doing a full-on promotion for it here, but yeah, Materia Hunter is awesome, so highly recommend it. Anyway, the question here is, what do we have to do as far as the serial numbers so you don't get in trouble? Because obviously people, I think it's fair for people to go into an event and go, I don't want to get a game loss or something because I screwed up in writing down the serial number wrong in some way or not doing it in the way that they wanted. So as a quick reiteration, the reason for writing down deck lists and serial numbers in the first place is because at these bigger events, we're trying to maintain the integrity and honesty of the tournament. And part of that is that you submit your deck list of what you're playing so that if you get deck checked, that they can check the deck that you sat down to play with against what you registered to make sure that you either weren't swapping out cards between rounds or that you didn't write down a separate kind of list where there was stuff that was written down that's not in your deck and vice versa, or in the really messed up scenario, if you submitted a deck list that was just a completely different deck than what you've been playing, or you've been swapping decks between rounds or something, right? There's everything in there from the kind of innocent mistake all the way up to blatant cheating. And so we use deck lists, of course, at these events to, like I said, to ensure the honesty and integrity of the event, and just be able to check those things against each other. So with that being said, as a judge or a tournament organizer, if you're doing one of these deck checks, what you're looking for on the list is to make sure that the cards match, right? To make sure that the cards that are in front of you match what's on the list. And the good thing with FFTCG is that whenever we've had cards that have been reprinted, either as a promo or in a later set, or in the case of the Legacy collection, they had their own Legacy numbering, and then it includes the original serial number of the card that was reprinted. They always include that original printing in it, right? So because of that, you kind of have the option that you can do it either way, right? If you're using a reprint of, Megisa, then you can write down the serial number for the original Megisa on there, 12 dash whatever it is, and then you can put that there. And if you're using a Legacy copy and we see that you just wrote down the Opus 12, but you have the same number of Megisas, right, then you're fine, right? You're not going to get a problem for using a different printing than what's on there. And similarly, if you write down just the Legacy numbering on it, but not the original one, we'll know what you meant. Now, obviously, you don't want to run a situation like don't write down the Legacy number and not the regular one if you're using the regular one, just because that gets confusing. We could figure it out in most cases, most scenarios, and you probably wouldn't necessarily get a game loss for it, but that's just something that I don't think people would be doing on purpose anyway, but just to bring it up. So yeah, to swing back to the question here, you can use just the regular serial number, because as long as the serial number you wrote down matches at least one of the serial numbers that's at the bottom of the card, then we're golden. Then, it matches what you're showing on the page is what's in front of us as the person who's doing the deck check, and you're all good. So yeah, you're not required to write out the full thing there. You can if you want to, although that if you look at the column there, the serial number is not that wide, so you're probably not gonna be able to fit both of them in there. But if you did, then I guess more power to you, as long as it's legible. But yeah, so there you go. Tournament question. Next question here is, so Garland says I gain control of a forward opponent controls for 1 turn, and there's another backup, Edgar, who says I can play 1 cost 2 or less character onto the field. So if my opponent plays a forward who has an enter the field ability, and I respond by playing Garland and gaining control of the enemy forward, do I gain the benefit of his forward's ability? I love this question because it's clever. I would have not, I never would have thought about combining these 2 cards to do this effect, but it's cute. I like it. So what's happening here is you have Garland, who's just 2 CP backup here, and it says when he enters the field, choose 1 forward opponent controls, you gain control of it until the end of the turn. Nice, simple effect, right? He just pulls somebody over to your side for the duration of the turn that he enters. Then you have Edgar, who has his action ability, where you dull him, you break him, and it says play 1 character of cost 2 or less from your hand onto the field. And what's clever here is that most of the time when we have these effects that you can use to play a character not on your turn, it's got some sort of restriction. Or I guess I should say it more as that most of the time you're not allowed to do it on your opponent's turn, right? They'll say you can do this to play a character, from your hand, from the break zone, from somewhere else. But for balance purposes, they make it so it's only on your turn, or it's only during your main phase. Things like that. That the vast majority of the time, they don't let you play characters onto the field with effects during the opponent's turn, unless it's like a summons, Phoenix or something, right? But Edgar doesn't care. Edgar's like, it could be whatever phase. If you can use action abilities during this phase, go ahead and do it. Just play that character, do your thing. So in this case, the person asking the question, it's the opponent's turn. They break Edgar. Edgar's effect plays Garland onto the field, and they're choosing they're choosing the opponent's character that was just cast, and then take control of that character, or forward specifically, right? And they're asking whether they get the forward's ability that it has the enter the field ability. Now it's a little bit vague the way this is asked. In which scenario they're thinking they're getting the ability, if they're getting it because now they control the character and it triggered from it, or if they're getting it the ability because now it's gone to their side of the field. So I'll answer both of those just to make sure to kind of cover all bases. The the first one, which is because now they control the character, do they get the auto ability? The answer to that is no. They don't get the auto ability because when an auto ability triggers, it will trigger for whoever controlled it at the time that it triggered. And that won't change. Once it's triggered, it is tied to the player who controlled the character at the time that it triggered. Doesn't matter what happens after that point. It's locked in on whoever controlled it at the time that it triggered. So because of that, even though this is clever and cute and you took control of the character, you don't suddenly get to like go, oh, that's my auto ability now. Cool, let's put that on the stack. Especially because by the time you can actually use the Edgar ability, the auto ability that triggered is already on the stack, but that's a whole other thing. Now, the separate side of this, the other half of the question or what they might be asking is, since they took control of the character, do they now get their own instance of that ability, the enter the field ability? The answer there is also no, but for a different reason. The reason is that there's actually only one field. And this can be confusing because there's a lot of cards and effects that say when such and such enters your field or when it enters your opponent's field. And I hate the wording on that, to be honest, because it does imply that there's two fields, and most of the zones in the game, there are two different zones, one for each player, right? You each have your own deck, you each have your own hand, you each have your own break zone, you each have your own removed from play zone, right? So when you're playing, you have your characters on the field and their characters on the field. It's natural to think there are two different fields, and if I took control of a character, it needs to move zones from their field to my field in order for that to play out, right? Completely natural. And actually, to be honest, it used to be that the advanced rules specifically said that there were two fields. They only just corrected that, I think, in the last year or so to say, oh yeah, by the way, no, there's only one field. So there's only one field. There's just two different sides of it, your opponent's side and your side. So when you take control of a character, they are not changing zones. Because they're not changing zones, they're not entering the field, which means if they have an ability that triggers from when they enter the field, taking control of them is not going to trigger that ability. So, in both scenarios, you do not get the ability just because you stole it. I still like the fact that you get to steal it. That's cool. Stealing opponent's forward right after they play it is just fun. I don't know if it's good, but it's fun. So I like the ingenuity there. But you're not going to be able to kind of hijack the auto ability. All right, we are moving on to our last question here. This last question is about the end phase, and it's the end of our rules roundup. So I'm a sucker for being thematic, so hope that you're enjoying that as well. But we're going to talk about the end phase. Question is, how does Scarmiglione's protection interact with cards that trigger at end of turn effects, like LB Sephiroth? These are both somewhat recent cards here, so let's go over what we're talking about. The first is that Scarmiglione has this, he's got back attack. Most of his is the printings of Scarmiglione, most of them have back attack. He likes to just show up whenever you're not expecting him. Very, very thematic if you've played through 4. But he's got this ability when he enters that when he enters, you choose a forward. If that forward is card named Golbez, gains an ability that says this forward cannot be chosen by your opponent's summons or abilities until the end of the turn. Since they're asking about the protection here, I'm going to assume that's what happened, is that there's a Golbez that was chosen by this effect. Because if Scarmiglione chooses something else that's not Golbez, it doesn't gain the protection part of this. But then LB Sephiroth has an auto ability that says at the end of each of your turns, choose one dull forward other than Sephiroth and break it. So our scenario here is it's the Sephiroth player's turn. They have Sephiroth on the field. Presumably Golbez is dull. And so Scarmiglione, before the end phase, Scarmiglione gets played with back attack, chooses Golbez. Golbez now has this ability that he's gained that says that he cannot be chosen by the opponent's summons or abilities until the end of the turn. And then we have Sephiroth. And when does his ability trigger? At the end of the turn. So the underlying question here is, how do these interact with each other? They both are things that deal with the end of the turn, is Golbez still protected when Sephiroth's auto ability is happening? And the end phase is actually the reason why these questions pop up is because the end phase is the second most complex phase in the game right after the attack phase, right? Main phase 1 and 2, they're pretty straightforward, right? There's not multiple steps to them really. You just kind of loop through the same options. There's not multiple steps to it. And the draw and activate phases are extremely straightforward. They don't even have priorities in them. But the end phase, now the attack phase we know is complicated. There's a lot going on there. But the end phase also has multiple steps to it. And it's also a phase where there's priority, but you're not allowed to like cast things on purpose and stuff like that. So there's a lot of complexity in the end phase. And knowing kind of how it plays out is both a challenge, but really important to make sure that we're ending every turn correctly. To go over what's happening here, when you first start the end phase, the very first part of the end phase is all auto abilities that say at the end of the turn trigger at that point. It's the very first thing that happens in the end phase. So Sephiroth's ability is going to trigger as soon as you hit that end phase. It's going to trigger, and then there's a priority. It goes on the stack, and then at that point, the Sephiroth player chooses a target for Sephiroth's ability. Now, at this point in the end phase, all abilities that say until the end of the turn have not worn off yet. That happens during a later part of the end phase. It's kind of another couple steps down. I'm not going to lay out exactly all the end phase here, but just trust me on this, or go check the advanced rules and you'll see that the part where until the end of the turn effects wear off is later. So because of that, at the point in time where Sephiroth's auto ability is going on, you have to choose your target. At that point, Golbez still has that protection that says he cannot be chosen until the end of the turn. So yeah, in general, if you're talking about auto abilities that are in the end phase, let's say at the end of the turn, and you're trying to figure out whether other effects that say they last until the end of the turn, if those things are still in effect, they are still in effect. They will be in effect during the kind of main part of the end phase where auto abilities can trigger and happen. I'm not going to say more than that because it'll get more complicated than it needs to be right now. But yeah, for our purposes, pretty much anytime you see an auto ability trigger during the end phase, those effects are still in play. So yeah, Golbez would still be protected from Sephiroth, and they'd have to either choose something else or not have a valid target or something like that. So anyway, that's the final question for today. Thank you so much for watching this far and for checking out the videos. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, then I always appreciate seeing the subscriptions come in. Likes are also appreciated. So your typical YouTube thing here, like and subscribe, all that fun stuff. Thanks again to everybody who has liked or subscribed in the past here. I appreciate all of you. And you can always find me in other places on Twitter, Facebook, Discord as well. If you have any questions or things you want me to talk about and cover, then reach out to me in one of those various places. It's always great to hear from people and kind of hear about what they want to see, what they want to hear, or feedback on these videos and stuff. I think I'll leave it at that for now. So as always, thank you for watching. I'm Judge Jared, and until next time, court is adjourned.